Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you happen to be in this wide, wonderful world. Welcome again to our weekly show. My name is Scott, and with me, as always, is Trina Paulus, who is the author of Hope for the Flowers, but so much more. And, you know, you've got a lot planned for this program. Uh, and one of it is part of it is the history of genetic engineering or GMOs, but you've also got something else to share with us. Why don't you start with that?
Well, Scott, one of the exciting things right now is my work with the South Bronx. The South Bronx is one of the community places, the major community place. It's a very modest house, uh, with the walls next to one another, just a skinny little house like this in the middle of uh, Spanish South Bronx. Not a rich section at all, a very simple section in which a couple of our Grail people, and the Grail is an international movement I've been privileged to work with since I first came to Grailville in 1949, if you can imagine, when I was 18 years old. 18. I gave up. Ah, Scott, thank you for putting this. This is our U.S. Grail website, it's a little suburb of it. And I was seeking a way to become more spiritually prepared to do work in the world without becoming a nun. And this was the only place I could find to do it. So this is what I was thrilled to be at. And I did the laundry for the first year, which was just perfect after 12 years of school to do simple manual labor and have time for silence and time for prayer and time to go deeper into things and the soil and the earth. And although I came up from a family that was one generation from an actual farm, and we composted and had a garden every year in our backyard in Cleveland Heights, Ohio. This was also a big thing. We did work together. We brought in the hay together. At one point, if you can imagine, of us, the 60 women who were there during the year were 90% self-sufficient in food. If you can imagine that in that time, it was 1949, 1950. And we used to sit around during canning season, which is September, and just sit and somebody would read a book to us like Cry the Beloved Country or something like that about segregated South Africa by Alan Paton, for instance. And we would all be fixing apples and getting everything ready. And then it would go to our canning kitchen and we would can for the winter and do all those things. So we were really very, very simple living. We had outdoor, we call them lilies. They all popped up around. These are outdoor latrines where someone would gather our poop from the day before and take it away and compost it, not putting it on root vegetables or anything that year, but around trees or making a pile that nobody ever saw and bringing a clean bucket to you every day. So that was the life that I was living for quite a few years. And it was a wonderful life. It was a high cultural life with a very simple surroundings. I slept in a mattress on top of a table in the art center for many years. I heated. It was behind a fireplace, and we heated ourselves with wood and coal and such. And we had one pipe that stuck up because when I first came to that building, we had chickens in the big part, and we were in the smaller part with triple-decker metal beds. So you can see that this was not a honeymoon facility, but so beautiful. It reminded me of what I understood about the workmen at Chartres, with this gorgeous participation in a culture that they belonged to too, but living very simple lives. Well, we did too. And that was an amazing experience to have the privilege to have the education, what we had, the readings from Tolstoy, the readings from C.S. Lewis, the readings from Winnie the Pooh, the readings about the changes in the church going back to the early centuries and getting rid of some of our Catholic excesses. This is what we were into. And it was a very Catholic place at that time. The Grail now is a movement of women of all kinds of spiritual searches. So it's not like it was when I came. But anyhow, this place in the South Bronx that this wonderful thing is happening. This is a commission on the status of woman. And they're having two interns there already. And I had the privilege of hearing from these brilliant women, which we hope will be on this little series here. This is us sitting, some of them sitting around in the South Bronx living room. You have to imagine, you know how those those buildings are built. They're long and skinny from the front to the back, and they're not very deep either. These are simple houses, and they crowd everybody in when the CSW happens, when the Commission on the Status of Woman, and the people are just starting to come in, and two of them are there, and I heard them speak so articulately beautiful. One was from Mozambique, and the other was from Papua New Guinea. And the background of these places is just so amazing. And we have a little program every Monday at 12 noon, where we also are in touch with people around the world, part of our Earth Network. And what a privilege to be online with people from Mozambique, Kenya, South Africa, and Zimbabwe, and to hear the stories of their courage. And what I realized, why I want to make this a feature for the next couple of months, is because this is an area that I got very deeply into in around 1996, when we were starting to approve genetically engineered food, calling it the same as other food, against the opinion of all the scientists who even worked at the FDA at that time. But this was seen to be a politically able decision, that it wasn't important that they follow the science. And then gradually, they didn't call it genetically engineered food, which implied that it's done in the laboratory. It sort of emerged into become GMO. That was most largely say it's meant to be the same thing, but it's a different feel when you hear GMO, because in a way, a genetically modified organism could happen naturally, but these don't. And for instance, 96% of the world's, and most of the world's corn is now genetically engineered. And we're fighting with Mexico still, because we want to be able to export it into Mexico, the birthplace of corn, And I was very engaged. I was not engaged so much with the Commission on the Status of Woman, but I was a commission. I was very much involved. Every time they had something on agriculture or energy, I would go to the United Nations, and it was practically the only thing I did during those weeks, because I had to get up very early to get in there by 9 o'clock when the NGOs would meet together on the Commission on Sustainable Development. That's what I went to. And that was a tremendous effort of learning on that part, and to see the United States role in all this stuff. And the genetically engineered stuff was in that whole thing. And I learned so much through that experience, but now I don't feel so good about it. And I'm kind of glad we're out of the World Health Organization, because during the pandemic, they were really very bossy, and they wanted all the countries now to sign this whole thing, that they would have the sole authority to decide something was a pandemic and set the rules for every country in the world. And it's not a fair assessment. There's no listening to the people who have another point of view. There's censorship totally involved with it. So that's the one area that I know something about as well, that the health thing. But I want to just show this. This is one of the banner things that we were involved with, Millions Against Monsanto. And here's another thing that we were this was our Cornucopia Network newsletter that I worked on for many, many years. This was on our 30th anniversary. And this is Let Us Decide. And that was defeated. We wanted to be able to have labels on things that were genetically engineered. So soybean and corn and cotton are the worst. They're big staples. And of course, there are many other things that are genetically engineered. The only way that it is not genetically engineered is if you get USDA certified organic. And some things are not so important, but some things are very important that you do that. You don't want strawberries that are not organic because they're sprayed with bad stuff on them and you can't get them off of a strawberry. A banana might be a different thing, and an avocado would be a different thing, although it has its problems about being involved with the cartels in Mexico now. So here I am. I love avocados, and now that's another thing I have to watch my step with. So there's so many things right now that you have to pay such close attention to. So this is one of my own areas, and I was trying desperately today to find something we took to the United Nations and passed out to a big conference that was on genetically engineered food, where a lot of people were in favor of it. And we had this wonderful 21-page document, and I was very engaged in. I've been less engaged in recent years until I heard again from Sarah and Caroline in Uganda and Zimbabwe, and yes, and Kenya. So it's against the law now to save seeds in these countries and pass them on to one another. And what I see is that it's really the same problem as we were worrying about 20 years ago. And one of the biggest problems is that the influence the United States has, not just on the fact itself that it changed their agriculture of Africa, but also on the attitude. Because Sarah was explaining to us how some of the women that were in the course about natural fertilizers using the dung from the chickens and the cows and as a natural fertilizer, which keeps the ground moist and able to absorb water when it comes. And it's in a very dry situation in these countries. And so there's nothing. And the way that the soil is ruined by fertilizer and genetically engineered seeds, it doesn't have any life in the soil anymore. And it also pollutes the water. When the water does come, it runs fertilizers and the bad stuff off into the streams. So everything is bad about it, except it's much faster looking. And in the first year that you use agriculture fertilizer, like in the so-called Green Revolution in India, it looks like it's the solution to everything. And in India, they changed their whole social structure around so that the people who worked on the big landowners' lands had a place to make their own garden and feed themselves. And then the landowners found that they used tractors and fertilizer, they would get these quick crops in the beginning. And that what we did over there, fertilizer companies gave the people the fertilizer, and they gave them the genetically engineered seeds, which they can't replant. They can't replant from 2 points of view. It's against the law because they are now patented seeds. But it's worse than that. They're called the killer seeds. They're suicide seeds. They don't grow true like a heritage seed that you have saved from generation to generation. So to find out that some of our Grail people are actually working at these things over there, but that they're up against the illusion that we have transported over there, that somehow something faster that solves the problem. And of course, there's hunger. There's hunger. So I can understand how people feel, okay, it's faster, but it won't be good for them after a year or two. And so how do you counteract that tremendous pressure to do the quick fix, which we are very full of right here too. So I know I'm talking a lot today, but this is sort of a history. I've been in it since 1996. I actually the U.S. organic standards were going to have sewage sludge produced food, which is very toxic, and I was very involved with that question. Irradiated food and genetically engineered food is part of the first organic standards. And they had 4 hearings around the country in 1998. And 900 of us went to Rutgers, and I actually videotaped that whole thing. The people up at the stage, they stayed all day long. They stayed till 10 o'clock at night listening to people who wanted to speak. And they just went out when they had to, I guess, to get a bite to eat or go to the bathroom. And but they were there all day long. And fortunately, they threw that first whole standard out. So the next one is pretty good, except the big food people have diminished it slightly, but it still is pretty good. And there's what they call the dirty dozen that you shouldn't ever eat. That's not organically standard. And then the largely safer ones that you can also get lists of, that you could look that stuff up online to for organic standards if you're interested. So I've been engaged with that, and the fact that there's been suits that showed that it's not against the law to lie about these things. It turned out that 2 people down in Florida were dismissed, and they became whistleblowers about this matter. And the woman had a lawyer, and she managed to get by the first bar, but the man was defeated at the first bar, at the first hearing. And then in the second one, it was decided that since there's no law to tell the truth on the media, it's just a recommendation, it's just a rule. So it's not binding. So you can lie all you want about how safe genetically engineered food is, for example. That's what was the case there. And you couldn't win the suit against them. The other awful legal thing that I was aware of, it was the Alliance for Biointegrity put out a suit representing farmers and different people against the U.S., the FDA, for ruling that it's the same, that the food produced with the genetic engineering is the same, against the will of all their scientists at the FDA. We had, with the discovery, there were like 51,000 pages, if I remember right, 51,000 pages showing how the scientists disagreed with that decision. And the judge took about a year or so to come to a conclusion about it. But they went back and said that at the time, people didn't know how bad it was. So therefore, it could be a governmental decision, and the scientists did not have to be listened to. So these are shocking things to see how our laws have been subverted. So I'm more political here today than usual, but these are such serious matters. And I just want to share with you that I hope that we can have some of these wonderful people coming from the Commission on the Status of Women here with us in coming weeks. And it's such a privilege to be part of a movement that has these contexts around the world. So that's quite a little sermon I've given today. It's very cold here in Montclair still. And the snow is still on the ground. And I'm not getting as much walking in as is good for me to keep my own health up. And I'm very grateful for all of you who have come to this. And we see where we go from here with our lives, our country. And I'm really out to build unity and to see how we can work together across all kinds of apparent divisions every place. So I wish to bless us all as we go forward through this new year and this new administration with all of its ups and its downs and its surprising events. And I don't know a lot of the people who are up for agreement, but I do know this one, that I all for him. Okay. So peace to you all. bless you. Amen.